Hey folks, welcome to part 4 of the Apple Picker tutorial series. And I'm excited to be able to share this last bit with you. I realized that in parts 1 through 3, I made it to a point where we were going to add some code to catching apples, but that was kind of the end of a section. I probably should have this portion of the video appended to the previous version, but I'm wearing a different shirt. It's not really going to flow quite nicely, and so it is what it is, and we're going to pick up right where we left off with catching apples. So what we're going to do is add the following lines to the basket's C# script. And so I'm going to switch between this view in our O'Reilly Learning interface and our Unity view of this chapter and of this exercise. So just to get us caught up, we have an apple tree and trunk and leaves, and that's showing on the screen. And then everything else that we're controlling is living over here in the assets, and it's dynamically called rather than being positioned in the scene, right? So the other thing you might notice is that my view up here is just a little bit different, and we have an isometric view of the camera in use, and then we could also switch back to a perspective view. So if we wanted to build into this scene and add some things behind our tree, we could use the grid and build in some characteristics behind the scene if we wanted to throw a background in there or something like that. But we're going to use this isometric view just so you can see that this viewport is ending up being a 2D type of viewport, but it's actually looking over a 3D scene. Okay. Also, I'll hit play just to remind that what has happened thus far is we have some randomness happening here, and we have the apples that are falling, and we do have the apples that are then being destroyed after they go off screen. But what we didn't do is code anything that would allow for the baskets to disappear whenever they moved, whenever they collide with the basket. So that's our next step. So here we are. We have the catching apples section that we're in, and so we're going to add the following bold lines only to the basket C# script. And down here, these are the lines of code that we're going to add. What I'm going to do is just grab these for convenience sake, and making sure that we are capturing the right code here. I'm going to click copy, and then I'm going to come over to my Visual Studio, and I'm going to go back into Unity, and I'm going to double click open the basket code. Let's not give them feedback right now. We're in the middle of something, guys. We're trying to get some stuff coded up. And my copy and paste did not work well at all. So what I'm gonna do is just do it the right way, man. And I'm gonna go back to my Firefox. I'm gonna bring up the Visual Studio, and we're gonna type in these lines the right way, because it never pays to take shortcuts, and I should know that by now. But here we are. So what this code is going to do essentially is going to allow us to code a collision here. So we're going to say void on collision enter. And you notice a few hints come up. I'm going to move my face so that I'm not in the way here. So hold on one second. And there we go. Okay, so now what you see is that void on collision, as soon as I started typing that in, let's get that back. Where did it go? On, there we go. Collision, enter. Okay. That went pretty quickly, so I'm going to try it one more time. So I do void on collision, enter. You'll see a number of different types of collisions that you can code for. We have collider hits and staying in 2D, exiting, etc. And it's all these discrete little moments in the code that I think are really, really powerful, because you can code something for whenever a collision spot is entered versus exited. And so if the collision has hit, you have the code run for the collision, and then that might be a sequence of events. And then after that, on collision exit, once you exit that collision spot, then that that sequence ends. So, but we're going to do on collision enter as directed, and you'll see that that Visual Studio Code is attempting to tell us what to name this variable. All right, so I'm going to call it call because that's what my book says to do, and I want to follow along with the book. So over here, void on collision enter, collision call. Note that collision is a particular type of game object variable that we can call to. It's part of the game objects, and then with the game object, we're going to do this. So we're going to do game objects, right? And we're going to call this variable collided with. All right. So we're still getting used to the fact that C# requires us to declare what the variable is before we name the variable. And so, a game object collided with, and we're going to say COLL because that's what we named the thing right above, and it's going to be object, right? So this one little line, very smart little line of code, it allows us to declare a new variable, and it's the game object that we are calling to, okay? Now, that's a very basic one, right? Because let's look at this next line. It's an if statement. And so we're going to go with if collided with dot tag is equates to Apple. Right? So this requires a couple of things, and this gets a little bit tricky. We're going to do destroy collided with. Right? So, why is this tricky? All right, let's read backwards from the code. We want to destroy collided with, all right? So the object that hits the basket is going to be destroyed the moment it hits the basket, all right? That object that we want to be destroyed is going to be an apple. So anything that we tagged in the Unity interface as an apple, as long as it collides with the game object that we attach this script to, then that game object is the one that's going to be destroyed, okay? Or this game object is attached to the basket, right? And so if the basket collides with a tag of apple, then we destroy the thing that was collided with it, that collided with it. So it's going to be the game object of the apple, right? So this is kind of I don't want to call it backwards logic, but it's a type of logic that doesn't always work on. It doesn't always work out the way we think it might. So I also am coming back to this screen, and there's an error here, and this error came from whenever I cut and paste earlier. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to solve this error real quick, and I will be right back. Okay, so if you do as I say and not as I do, what happened with that error was the text that I had pasted in came straight from the book, and then the other text was stuff that I typed in, and so the stuff that I typed in had Mac line endings, and the stuff that was in the book had different line endings. So I took it out into BBEdit, and I normalized the line endings using that piece of software. And so if you get to this point in the video and you're like, hey, this has happened to me, I'd love to know how that's done. I'd be happy to show you how to do that. But I'm going to leave that aside for now, and we're going to continue forward. So what happens is that in this particular space, we have said if collided with tag apple, we're going to destroy the collided with. And so let's take a look at the code now. So when we hit play, let's see if the behaviors add up. All right, so here come our apples. And as soon as they collide, check this out, y'all. Kaboom, kaboom, kaboom. Okay? So, so I'm going to hit stop on that for a second, and want you to see what's happening here. So remember, the basket game object is called dynamically through our code. It also has a basket script over here, right? So, and that basket script is where that connection is made between the basket game object, the prefab, and then the basket script. Now remember also, when we made the Apple game object, what did we do over here? We tagged that item as Apple. And so the game object that hit the basket is tagged Apple, and so therefore that's the one that disappears. If we had another object that didn't look like an apple that we tagged as an apple, that game object would disappear too. Computers are as smart as we make them, and so they usually are kind of dumb for a while. So what I'm gonna do here then is we'll call this a game, right? It is now moving to the wrong screens here. It is now an actual bona fide game. I mean, we have something that works. Now we have to add some additional information to this here. And so we'll resume down here. And so now we're going to go down to the GUI and game management section as well. All right. So there's a little bit that I don't want to skip by because I think it's important to follow through with everything. The basket script works. We saved it to Unity and we click play and we save our scene. And what he suggests here in step 4 is duplicate the current scene to use for testing game balance tweaks. So what we're going to do is go into Unity. We're going to click on scene 0 in the pane. To select it, we're going to right click on it. I'm sorry. We're going to go into I was looking in the wrong place. So we get caught up in the moment and we don't necessarily see what we're looking for. So under scenes, this is where we can manage scenes. This is the active scene. We don't duplicate things over here. We duplicate things here. So when I right click on scenes over here in assets, it gives me lots of file information-y sort of stuff. And so I'm just going to go ahead and work with this thing. Oh boy. I'm gonna go up to the edit menu. My bad. Thought the right click menu would have this, and I thought it would, and it doesn't, but I'm going to go to edit and duplicate, and that's going to give me a scene 1. Far be it from me to know why it's not here in this context menu, but it's not. So anyway, we have duplicated this, and now we have scene 1, and that's where he says that we will be able to make some variable changes and that sort of thing. All right, so let's take a breath here, and I'm going to stop recording, and then we'll do the GUI stuff in a 5th video. So catch me over there on the 5th video to wrap this up, and we'll do the GUI or the GUI and the game management stuff over there. All right, see you soon.